But from when a distant past nothing subsists, after the death of beings, after the destructions of things, alone, more fragile but more enduring, more immaterial, more persistent, more faithful, the smell and the taste remain still a long time, like souls. Remember, wait, hope on the ruin of everything else. Carry without flinching on their almost impalpable droplet the immense edifice of memory. And as soon as I recognized the taste of the piece of Madeleine, soaked in the linden that my aunt gave me, for I did not know yet and had to postpone to much later to find out why this memory made me so happy. Immediately, the old grey house on the street, where her room was, came like a stage of theatre, applying itself onto the little pavilion, overlooking the garden, which had been built for my parents in the rear, this truncated side that only I ever seen previously, and with the house, the town. From morning to night and in all weathers, the square where I was sent before lunch, the streets where I was going shopping, the path we were taking if the weather was fine, and like in this game in which Japanese amuse themselves, soaking in a personal bowl filled with water, small pieces of paper, so fine instinct which, hardly did they plunge, stretch, circumvent, stain, differentiate, become flowers, houses, consistent and recognizable characters. Equally, now, all the flowers from our garden and those of Mr. Swann's park and the lilies of the Vivonne, and the good people from the village and their small dwellings, and the church and the hall of Combray and its surroundings, all of this taking shape and solidity was released, city and gardens, from my cup of tea. We have on one hand the Madeleine, which are this little sponge that Marcel Proust described as being these short plum little cakes which look as though they have been molded in the fluted scallop of a pilgrim's shell. And on the other hand, we have the popular French expression that stem from the passage of the book of Marcel Proust we've just read. And this popular expression described those smells, those objects, sensation that trigger a memory in us to resurface, and it always happens quite unexpectedly. And it's actually our five senses that triggers these memories. The long forgotten memory of Marcel Proust was shot back in his present, and triggered for him a very vivid memory, his youth at his Aunt Léonie in Normandy. And this past was given a new life in the present time, and present and past intertwined together. And it took very much Marcel Proust by surprise. And this is how Marcel Proust described the feeling that he felt. A delicious pleasure took hold of me, without the notion of its cause. He immediately rendered the vicissitudes of life indifferent to me, its harmless disasters, his illusory brevity, in the same way that love operates, filling me with a precious essence. Or rather, this essence wasn't in me, but was me. I had stopped feeling mediocre, contingent, mortal. From where could have come from this powerful joy? This past, today, may well be intertwined in the present, but personally I do not feel nostalgia. I'm rather wary to idealize the past. I consider that even an era, if it was called the beautiful era, has had its lot of beauties and problems. We are not in a Parisian cafe. We are in 2021. I am here to share the thinking I've made from my kitchen alone. So I've made a thread from the decade of Marcel Proust, when he wrote his book, which happened to be the same decade in which my grandmas were born. And from there, I've unrolled the story of what we eat, and I found a focus on our food choices. What are the impact of what we buy? So to give a bit of context, the beautiful era had its own norms, which wiped the autonomies of my grandmas. And because they were women, they were also dominated first by their dads, who chose their husband, and after that they were reliant to their husband to the rest of their lives. My youth has been very different, but he still held some of that. And now, for my kitchen, in 2021, I'm thinking of my children. What food can I give them? What are the best foods for them to prepare them for their future? How can I nourish them? Of course, to nourish their body, their minds, but also their self-esteem, and for them to have faith in their inner resources. Where am I coming from with this thinking? 6 years ago, I became a mum, and it pushed me to follow my instincts. My eldest one came about as a whirlpool. It really changed my vision of the world, and I have had to surpass myself physically, and I became an insomniac. But today I really appreciate how it changed my vision of the world to look after these children. They both teach me on a daily basis to prioritize three things: togetherness, to have time together. When they were very babies and vulnerable, it's the contact that mattered. And to be fully there, to appreciate the present more. And the third thing is to take the time, as it comes. And yes, I have an agenda and expectations, but I try to detach myself so that they permit me to get things done, but they get done when they get done. Before I had children, I tried to fit in, I tried to understand the norms, but I always felt the odd one, and trying to fit in never worked anyway. So now I have my children, I really feel the impact, the influence that I have on them, and extensively the impact I have on others and on nature. And it made me 1,000 times more appreciative of nature. A little fact regarding my grannies is that 20 years ago, when I was young, and I was very confused to what was expected of me and where to go, what was my best step forward. And I've chatted to one of my granny, and she listened very well, but I felt daft because I thought it was this person who lived the Great War and who raised up 6 children with very little means. But she was very attentive and she listened very well. And she valued my choices, which she didn't have in her time. She had to choose her work, first place of work, and she just turned up there, and that was that. And they didn't question, that's what she told me, they didn't question. So she didn't diminish my dilemmas. And she was actually the first, almost the only, who encouraged me to take that opportunity that I found to come for 6 months to Manchester. And she said, travel shapes youth. Once in Manchester, I had to learn the language from scratch because I've been hopeless at school. And I've carried with me for 3 years a 5 centimeters thick bilingual dictionary. And I had to work out the norms, the new norms here, and yet I didn't really fully grasp what were the norms of where I come from in France. So it took me 3 years to understand the language, to be able to speak back, and nothing's been evident, and to make sense of the norms. And I had nothing to lose, and I have had to have a go. I had to try. And really, it was the travel that had to shape me. My experience of the Madeleine here, when I taste a Madeleine soaked in a cup of tea, I feel something different to Marcel Proust, and I have adapted the text, the original text, with my words to be able to explain to you what I feel. But from when a distant past, context and means changed, after the death of beings, after the destructions of things, alone, less fragile, more enduring, more immaterial, more persistent, more faithful, norms and nostalgia remain still a long time. If only, like consideration, that weighs, contemplates, leaves a place and thinks about, on the ruin of everything else, could carry without flinching, on its almost impalpable influences, the immense edifice of a transition. And as soon as I bake or buy some tea, though I did not know yet and had to postpone to much later to find out why this transition makes me happy, immediately the ingredients and the order in which they are listed on packagings come like ID cards naming provenances, the fields in which people work, the battery farms in which animals just survive, these living and working conditions that only a few film and show, and with the ingredients, the flavor of our economy, with hardly any limits on beings and on the environment, as long as profit is made. The kitchen, where we can make a difference, the streets and sites where we go shopping, the varied path we can take if we are looking. And like in this game, in which Japanese amuse themselves soaking in a porcelain bowl filled with water small pieces of paper, so far indistinct, which, hardly did they plunge, stretch, circumvent, stain, differentiate, become flowers, houses, consistent and recognizable characters. Equally now, all the flowers from bushes and fruits from faraway fields, and the animals of the world, and the good people from their work and their small wages, and the norms and whole of our social contract, all of this, taking shape and solidity, is released, work conditions and animals, from my cup of tea. Here are my observations. I've realized that we are always linked to one another, whatever we do. We are linked to those people in the present time and to these people in our past. So, like Marcel Proust felt nostalgia, I feel a rather, without dramatizing, I feel a rather bittersweet taste. But our past and the people in our past shaped our sense of belonging. And together, the past, the experiences, and the sense of belonging shape our representations and our self-esteems. Each time we meet a situation in our lives, I believe that we refer to this sense of belonging that we have. So whether we trusted the people that brought us up or that we rebelled, we are linked to them, and that there's nothing we can do about that. And we carry that sense of belonging to our children. And that's fine, but the thing I don't want to pass on to my children is the denial. And to avoid that, I found that I'm looking for what feels right to me. And this traditional Madeleine, as sweet as it is, doesn't feel right to me. So we will look at the ingredients, and on this invisible guest, that's all these people and animals that are involved in making the Madeleine today. Okay, so let's look at this ingredient to make this traditional Madeleine. So we have first the eggs. We've got baking powder, flour, sugar, butter, and lemon. That's what we need to make a traditional Madeleine. So let's observe, for example, a box of eggs like this one. So when we look in our supermarkets, they put a lot of emphasis on the fact that they are British. And this is the job of the lion, the British lion quality, that they make sure the eggs we buy are from Britain and that they are the hens are vaccinated against the salmonella. The other thing is that our eggs all tend to be RSPCA assured. And the RSPCA give us some standards, and I went on these standards on their website, and they list how the hens are fed, what they are given to drink, the space they are allowed to have, also the condition of their daily lives and how they are killed. They have noticed how they always say how it's more, they have more daylight, they have more shade, they have more space to roam. But I'm just wondering, I can't help thinking, more than what? More than cage hens, or more than 2 years ago, more than 10 years ago? So I still find it unclear. Now, we all tend to make the choice to buy free-range eggs, but what does it mean? So from the EU website, so it says the EU egg marketing legislation stipulates that for eggs to be termed free-range, hens must have continuous daytime access to runs, which are mainly covered with vegetation, and a maximum stocking density of 2,500 birds per hectare. The hen house condition for free-range hens must comply with the regulation for birds kept in barn system, with a maximum stocking density of 9 hens per square meter of usable area. Hens must be provided with nest boxes. It actually says nest boxes, but I presume it's nest. Adequate perch, providing 15 centimeters of perch per hen, must also be provided. Litter must be provided, accounting for 1/3 of the ground surface. This is used for scratching and dust bathing. So that's as clear as it gets, but the Guardian stated that free range, it was actually confusing. Under EU regulation, if a hen has been inside for more than 12 weeks, it no longer counts as free range. According to the RSPCA, it means no more than 9 hens per square meters, 10 centimeters of feeder a bird, and dry drinker for 10 birds. Compassion in World Farming, CIWF, graded various animal welfare schemes out of 100. British Lion Free Range got 33, RSPCA 66, and Organic Eggs with Soil Association label got 70 points. So does that give us a clear view of the condition in which the hens been brought up? I've typed on Google free-range British eggs, and these are the pictures that I found on top of the Google search. The first one shows a picture from Wikipedia, the other one from the Telegraph, Metro, and I've got these pictures from the RSPCA, the front cover of their standard. And we have also a video on the PETA's website, which is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which show a different story altogether. So who to believe? What is free-range eggs? And mostly, what are the conditions of these hens? What does that say about our relationship with others, with those workers in these factory farms? And what does it mean about our relationship with the animals themselves? So, do we feel that superior that we can decide how much they eat and what they eat, how much they drink and how much they drink, how much space, the minimum space we can allow them? We are superior that we deprive them to develop their abilities of looking after their offsprings. And also we just decide when and how they are killed. So now after that, we have the flour. With my husband, we've ordered a 16-kilo bag of flour directly from the mill in Cheshire, which apparently is a rare independent mill. We did that during the confinement. And I presume the wheat grains were grown in England, in Cheshire even. Well, I called to double check for this exercise of the presentation, but the person on the phone was very bothered by my question and passed me on very quickly to the technical team that was unavailable and who I left a message with but never got back to me. Because on their website they do say that from the white flour, the grains come from England, but also from a wide part of the world, and I don't know which one. In terms of process, the wheat is the principal source of the white flour, made from the endosperm part of the wheat grain. When flour is freshly milled, it is naturally a light yellow color. Over time, the flour will turn more white. Commercially, though, freshly milled flour is treated with bleaching agent to give it its pure white color. These bleaching agents are normally organic peroxides like acetone peroxide and benzoyl peroxide, nitrogen dioxide or chlorine. Let's move on to the butter. So the butter is also British, produced in the UK and produced with British milk. The company that produced this butter says they are a leading organic dairy cooperative with their cows grazing on untreated pastures while preserving white flour margins where their cows do not graze to be part of the pasture for pollinators. Regarding butter, we have from the BBC Food blog this information that in the UK we have good butters as the mild summers gives green and pleasant lands for cows to graze. The best cream comes from dairies cows grazed in meadows, and the cow's diet marks the flavor of butter. Industrial scale butter production involves extracting small amounts of cream from whey, a byproduct of cheese making, and cultures are then added to the cream to provide longevity. Continuous churn are used with the capacity to produce 20,000 pounds of butter per hour. It results in a consistent, if perhaps uninspiring product, but there are still companies around making butter the old-fashioned way. Whether this one does, I'm not too sure. But according to the Compassion in Word Farming, they do raise a case for the cows. So they say dairy cows produce some male calves, which are generally less suitable for beef production. So sadly, in the UK, some of these are either shot at birth or could be exported to low-welfare veal farms outside the UK. Due to the cooperation between Compassion in Word Farming, the RSPCA and the industry through the Calf Stakeholder Forum, more male dairy calves are now reared humanly for beef, and the number of cows being shot at birth has greatly decreased. But there is more work to do. Around 95,000 dairy cows are still shot every year. The most common type of dairy cow in the UK, in Europe and in America has been bred to produce very high yields of milk. Milk production per cow has more than doubled in the past 40 years. Given a natural healthy life, cows can live for 20 years or more. High-yielding dairy cows would typically be slaughtered after 3 or 4 lactations only, because their milk production drops. When they are organic, they are often healthier and can live a slightly longer productive life. Many of these requirements are met by farms with organic dairy accreditation. So after looking for this information, which really is just scratching the surface, I'm even more confused and I really don't know what I'm buying at the end of the day. And I can't rely on packaging. And we all know that they will praise the product and the production no matter what. There are apps, I believe, that can help us to make informed decisions in our purchase, but I have never tried. Okay, so let's do a little flashback to our Belle Epoque. So actually, out of my two grandmothers, only one could have made a Madeleine. And because she was the owner of a bakery with my granddad. I don't think many people in their household actually had the mold of the Madeleine. And neither, I was told by my parents, did people have dessert, definitely not on a daily basis. My grandparents at the bakery offered cakes and tarts only at the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. And they were making otherwise dessert, but for special occasion on demand. My first granny was a seamstress, very skilled seamstress. And she had, I believe, an inspiration to create her own company to sew hats, but she was denied that creativity. So how did my grandparents at the bakery would have made madeleines, or even my other granny? How did they get eggs? Well, both of them had their own hens in their backyard. And it was rudimentarily arranged with wire mesh, and one granny also had rabbits. So they had the eggs straight from their own production. For the bakery, they did arrange a kind of a swap. My mum was actually the one delivering to farms in farms further afield, further away from the village. And she came back with trays of eggs. The flour was bought at the local shop, like we do, and the bakery was delivered with a dump truck from a town about 30 minutes drive away. Baking powder, the sugar was bought also at the local shop, and the bakery was delivered by a specialist wholesaler from a town half an hour drive away. The sugar beet, that's what we buy in majority, and that's what they did too, was first identified as a source of sugar in 1747. However, it was kept a secret until the Napoleonic Wars at the start of the 19th century, when Britain blockaded sugar imports to continental Europe. By 1880, sugar beet had replaced sugarcane as the main source of sugar on continental Europe. And it's in the 18th century that we see the desserts that are known in the French cuisine. So the madeleines, the soufflés, that became very, very well known. The Madeleine was created in 1755, and it's from a chateau, and it's the young servant called Madeleine that rescued the situation when the chef left the reception one day and didn't make any dessert. So she rustled up these ingredients and came up with this little cake shaped in like a shell. And this little dessert was very appreciated by the guest. So the novelty was named after the servant called Madeleine. And it's interesting to notice they had in this chateau sugar and lemon. And my granny bought sugar, they had sugar at their disposal, but they didn't use it in the same scale as we do now. And as for lemons, it's the same. They were rather rare. One granny had them because they were selling fruit and veg at the bakery. But for their madeleine they offered at the shop, they used the flavor of orange blossom, which was cheaper. For the butter, my grannies went every single day to shop for butter. So again, the granny from the bakery arranged a kind of a swap with customers, so they were delivered, and they had also other deliveries, but it was always from local farms, several of them. The other granny sent my dad and his sisters on a walk there to fill up the pot, the milk pot in metal, and that became a chore, I believe. My dad recalls really that nobody wanted to carry that milk pot or to go on that walk every day, but it was fresh. We can notice that their ingredients were whole, mostly plant-based, but local, always very local. And my grannies knew who they were buying from and what they were buying. And they definitely, even if they existed, didn't need any apps to help. So what was the diet of my granny? What were they eating before the industrialization that was just 50 years ago? So they ate mostly fruit and veg that they harvested themselves most of the time, and they had bread, potatoes, and they had dairy products bought on a daily basis. Then they had meat, but the meat was consumed in small quantities and from the animal that they had raised themselves, so the chickens and the rabbits. And they used every part of the animal, so which generated very little waste. And they made soup in majority and stews. Their product, their fruit and veg, was in fact what we call organic today, but even better because it was local and fresh. Now if we look at the eating plate recommended by our government, we can notice how my granny actually each day had 2 ingredients of each of the categories. So they were bang gone in terms of health. The thing they didn't have is a variety of recipes, and what they didn't have is the processed food, which is outside the plate. So not even really that considered as food. And they saw coming the industrialization, and the industrialization was presented to be for the people, and especially to ease the work of women at home. My grannies didn't have sink or fridge, so they made this pickle and preserved, and they didn't have oven. They used what is our gas cooker, a fire from below, and they didn't have microwave. Today we have microwave. It's quick and it's convenient, but we also all know that it's harmful to our health, particularly as we use plastic to heat our food, and that messes up with our hormones. So it's been seen a problem more for women because it's related to hormones. And the law passed so that this plastic is not allowed for children to have their food with BPA plastic containers. But it will soon change, I think, because now we realize that men have hormones too. So I think they will act on it because it does also mess up with their hormones balance. As for the processor, I fell in love with my processor, and I can make soups and stew in half the time that my granny needed. And I can make pastry, pizza dough very easily, and I can even do risotto without sticking to the pan, which I wasn't managing before. And he alerts me, there is a ding dong to tell me when it's ready. So it's preparation time, but cooking time, I can be distracted and do something else at the same time. But it shows that it can be done. It does help me to not buy processed food. So what about politics in our plates? How does it end up in our plates? So according to the World Economic Forum, I read this sentence: the choice of what you eat is perhaps globally as influential or more as your vote in national elections. So the structure of our agriculture, everything, all that we eat, the cultivation of animals and crops has massive political implications. So if we go back to the time before politics, as we know it, was when we were hunters and gatherers, I understand that we lived in small groups of 30, and there everybody was put into contribution to feed the group. So it was the skills prevailed over strength, and actually now they are realizing that there was perhaps no notion of gender, and a baby a young child was capital in the survival of the group. So what comes to my mind is the expression, it takes a village to raise a child. And it seems like he was very much put into practice then. Today, all jobs are driven by profits. And maybe out of a group of 30 in my streets, maybe 1, 2 or more may well be struggling to buy food, and I don't know. Nobody would know. Today, it's competitivity that prevails, and our skills have to conform, and our individual creativity is repressed. So all the women and every skin color of skins fight for the same thing, that they feel a lack of recognition. So we moan and we blame our leaders. But really, everybody is trying to get the same part of the cake. So the structure of our agriculture, what we eat, raise division as well. We just need to look what's in our supermarkets, the different quality of food. So we have the finest, supposed to have better standards, and then we have economical food with lower standards. So that divides our society, I believe. And now the place of babies and children is secondary in this society we are in that is driven by profit. So now we tend to drop off children to strangers, qualified strangers, and we let our children cry there at first before we get to know these qualified people. As parents, we get more and more distracted as well, so that's where how we raise our children. And with very little time at our disposal to reflect, and how much we are bombarded with clear cut views, I don't feel that we are making our own individual journey. And in fact, we are playing the game of being led. So after all this thinking, I can no longer bake a Madeleine with good conscience. Mostly because this Madeleine, I don't feel the ingredients alone supports the good health of my children. They have sugar and they lack the vitamins of fruit and veg, which they really, really need. So I've decided to change the way I cook. So I've changed the recipe and tried to adapt, and the Madeleine is no exception. So I've removed the animal-based ingredients, I've removed the sugar, and I've added veg into my new version, my alternative Madeleine. So the ingredients that I've chosen are the linseed, organic linseeds. This one comes from China. Unfortunately, they are from England, but the courier cost is quite expensive. So I hope next time I will be able to gather a group of friends or anyone who wants to order some linseeds, so we could share the cost of the delivery. And this replaced the eggs. I make what we call the linseed eggs. For the sugar, I've replaced it with xylitol and dates. The flour is a spelled flour that is mostly, well, it's entirely grown in Britain. And then for the butter, I went for a sunflower spread. And the veg I've added, it's the courgette and the carrots. And on top of that, I use the spices that I have at that moment. I like the linseeds because they are a great source of fiber, a good source of plant-based protein, and they contain healthy fats, the omega-3 that we need. The dates come from Tunisia, so that involve a whole array of people picking and transporting, for example. They are a good source of food. The xylitol comes from Scandinavia, from the cultivation of birch trees. It seems a very good product. 40% fewer calories than sugar, and it has negligible effects on blood sugar and insulin levels. And xylitol can starve the harmful bacteria in your mouth, reducing plaque buildup and tooth decay. This can help prevent dental cavities and inflammatory gum diseases. And also, it is sustainable because they don't cut trees in the production of the xylitol. So that seems a winner. However, regarding the sunflower spread, I'm less sure because it involves many ingredients from different countries in the EU, and it involves palm oil that comes from either Colombia or Brazil. So I don't know how that justifies be a product that in the future continues to be sustainable. And the carrots and the courgette, they come from England. Depending on the season, the courgette may be coming from Spain. There again, getting them organic so that there is no pesticide in them. To make the madeleine, I use a processor at home. So I first ground the linseed, the whole linseed that I get. Then I put it aside. Then I ground the dates, and I grate my carrot and courgette. And then I put all these three aside, and then I start to mix my butter melted with the xylitol, and then the flour. I mix that, and then one by one I start to add the linseed eggs and the grated vegetables, and all mixed together, and it looks something a bit like that. So the shape of the shell is a bit lost, but it remains with a sweet taste that my children like, and they have all the benefits. So from all this, I'm looking forward, and I'm making to my own self a little vision I look at. That's how I see it. So for example, for my kitchen, I really want to allocate more space so that I can buy in bulk my whole ingredient, plant-based. So I want to be more minimalist in my kitchen and keep only the appliances and the tools that I need and nothing more. And for the ingredients, like I rely a lot on bananas and chocolate, for instance, I would like at least in that production that these are organics, before the rest to be from where I live, and local and fresh. But for all the others, that they are transported by boat and have one way to be produced, which would be organic. I thought as well about communal kitchens. How could that work? Because we are in a world where everybody has something individually, where really I can really see how we could have more things in common. So, for example, children, we tell them to share, and they often say, it's mine, very virulent. But yet, we don't model that to them to say, oh yeah, but I've got a car, but it's mine, I do not share it. I've got this food that is mine, and I've got my chair, and I've got my TV program, and we are all about saying it's mine, my phone, you can't use. So I really think that the world would be better if we were thinking more in terms of community, what's in common. So the communal kitchen could work in a way that it would be very local in our streets, serve 30 people or less, which means we could share very top quality appliances, and then we could make economies by buying in bulk and share the deliveries of ingredients. And it would be a place of cohesion. In my kitchen, because that's what it is at the moment, I want it to be gender-free, where everybody is invited to cook to my children, where they develop their skills and helping. They are put to contribution. So I need to do more of that. And after COVID, what I really want to do is to drop the formality. So I was already casual before, but in the future, when I invite my friends, I really want to be casual, to be just as I am when, as and then, they arrive. And I'm not going to try anymore to try to cook a meal for 5 or more, all by myself, and prove that I can do it, and it has to be good. I would like my friends to help out in the kitchen and do their bit, preparing the table or spread the dough or whatever we are doing. They could even maybe choose what they want to eat. So the autonomy, that's a word important to me, autonomy, which I think, I seem to see that it's confused with the word freedom. But freedom, it's more the organization of what, living together so that we don't hurt others. But autonomy, as I see it, is that we have in ourselves our own limits. I barely know anyone that wants to hurt anybody else or want to take more place. So I think that's what we need to bring back to the fore. And my granny didn't have autonomies, and I'm not sure we do today. My granny had skills, and they had their own minds, but they didn't have the means to do what they wanted to do. But they could make informed decisions on what they were buying, and they were not led by slogans. Now, what I want to do to be autonomous more is that I'm told exactly the people that are involved in the food production, what are the raw ingredients, and what are the working and process conditions, and also what is the cost of whatever I'm buying onto the environment. And after these, I feel that I can use my autonomy to make sound decisions. So also, in my vision, there will be no more of that rhetoric of do this, do that, you should do this. I really would like to say goodbye to the ads for telling me, for bombarding me with things that I should be doing. And also, I'm not sure I like this next day concept of deliveries, because if we are given more time, we can plan ahead, and that would presumably reduce the transportations. So give me back the action of walking and cooking, whereas I don't have to feel like it's a chore. I didn't enjoy walking so much till now, but recently I've really enjoyed reset my biological clock by going for a walk in the morning. And walking is a great action to do to feed that autonomy that we have, to think about things, to be able to reflect. And we don't need a car as much as we perhaps use. And cooking, no, I don't want to buy processed food, because while cooking, and especially if I include my children and my guests, it becomes a convivial moment. So I don't want things made easier on that front. So it is not about going back. It's about reflecting. So it's not about going back to use horses to our profit, but it's not either about knowing less. It's about going forward, having more consideration to all of us, all beings, and go on from there with all that we know today. So just to finish, because it's about the French, there is the motto, the French motto that is known, liberté, égalité, fraternité, which is liberty, equality, and brotherhood. And in my mind, it would be, if we were using our autonomies, it becomes more autonomies, equality, and togetherness. And from there, I think that will be a great honor for these people that fought for these great values of the French revolutions. But I think in the world, how it has evolved, we have to include everybody and trust in our own abilities.
Je le sais, il est juste, la mineure sans cadence. Si ses strophes sont vétustes, ses fugues sans fulgurance, je l'apprécie si ce n'est que je n'en suis qu'au prélude. Et si le style est frais, ainsi cessera l'habitude. Je me mets au majeur, à la lutte au sol. L'accord à l'honneur vous baise sans bémol. Votre reste sous la main, je retire le capot et vous finissez sur le dos.